Welcome to another edition of Guns 101, our video welcome message for new gun owners, brought to you by the Self-Defense Radio Network. I'm Rob Morse from Self-Defense Gun Stories. My partners tonight, the one you can see, is Amanda Suffacool from Eye on the Target Radio. My partner that's behind the camera and invisible is Paul Lathrop from the Polite Society podcast. We're joined again by Tom and Diane Walls from the Firearms Academy of Seattle. Tom and Diane, a lot of handguns went home with brand new gun owners. Because of the quarantine, we haven't been able to get them into class. Talk about the right way to hold hands with your handgun.
Well, it does make a difference. You can take any tool, you can take a hammer, you can take a garden rake, take a shovel, and you can hold it wrong and still do what you need to do. But it's a lot easier to do the job and safer if you hold it right. So today, let's just talk about semi-automatics. Revolvers are fairly similar. Today, we're going to be using a series of dummy guns. These are plastic gun replicas. They can't fire because they're not guns. There's no moving parts. That's how we're going to keep it safe. Again, there is never a substitute for a class with a good, trained, qualified professional instructor. So let's talk about physics and let's talk about anatomy. You've got a tool and you've got to interface it with the biomechanical tool. With this dummy gun, we know, anybody knows that's had a television set or been to the movies. You press the trigger, the bullet comes out, and it goes wherever the muzzle is pointing at the time. So how come we go to the range and they don't always put the holes where we want them?
That's not where I'm at.
That's because that's where the muzzle was pointing. Something wiggled that gun around. The gun wiggle's a problem when you're holding it in your hand because your hand is moving when you're pressing the trigger. We need to get rid of that. We have some physics and we have some biomechanics. And let's start with the fact that this gun, were it real, would weigh what? About
2 pounds.
About
perhaps.
2 pounds. Okay. The pressure it takes to press the trigger to make it go bang is anywhere from a minimum for self-defense of
4
about
pounds.
to as much as
15 pounds on a
15
double action
on
revolver.
a really nasty one. Okay, that's anywhere from 2 to a whole bunch of times, 7 times more than the gun weighs. The trick is to press the trigger without moving it in the act of pressing the trigger. There's a couple things going on. There's leverage and then there's wiggle. First off, you've got a lever. You've got the slide reciprocating when it moves, and you've got the pressure, action and reaction. Let's science a little bit. Newton's third law, action and reaction. It's going to push the gun back against the fulcrum of your hand. You can imagine if I hold the gun really low, it's going to wiggle, and my fingers are going to break down here. However, if I hold the hand really, really high on the gun, get the bore axis of the barrel, so the recoil's coming as close to my forearm as I can, I've got less lever. So there's that leverage. So that has to be a factor. Secondly is where you put your trigger finger and where you put your fingers. So let's switch guns. Another dummy gun. I've got the trigger guard cut out of this. As far as placement of your trigger finger on the trigger, I'm going to make a mark. That's going to leave a mark. On my trigger finger, that's right about where I would take fingerprints. Okay, and I'm going to place that in the center of the trigger, not too low, not too high, and the center, and I'm going to wrap my hand around the gun. Okay, that's where the trigger finger goes. If it's too low, I'm pulling in leverage, and I will pull the gun down. If it's too high, I can move it. Ideally, I'd like a little space in here so my finger's not pushing on the side of the frame. Start with that, okay? Everything consistent with how you grip the handgun so you're not introducing variables. The second thing I can do with this one now that has a trigger guard, placing the finger, wrapping it around, is what to do with these fingers. You see a lot of stuff. And let's just talk about the gun hand for now. If I splay them out, they never quite go in the same place. Every time I press the trigger and squeeze my hand, the gun moves around in a different way because we have sympathetic muscle contraction in the hand. As I press my trigger finger, look at my other fingers, and they will tend to move a little bit too. That wiggles the gun. If I hold loosely with this hand and press on the trigger, even though this is a dummy gun, you can see it moves the gun around. Moves it in all kinds of weird ways. We don't want that. So, placement, wrap. I keep these 3 fingers together and close. I keep this finger, my social finger, up tight against the bottom of the trigger guard. And you'll notice I get nice and high on this gun. You see this little bump right here? I've got so much flesh on the back of that gun that it's actually making a ripple. And this is giving me my nice high grip. The other fingers are pushing in this way, so I'm not, when I'm pressing the trigger, contracting and moving it around. That's the basis of a grip. Good trigger finger placement, high up on the grip, and a nice firm grip. It's like a handshake that you really don't like the person very much. Okay, easy way to get there. Whether it's in a holster, the gun's sitting down, safety first. We need to keep that finger out of the trigger. So even if it's lying on a flat surface, what I like to do is I like to hold my thumb and forefinger like this, and these 3 fingers together, they're going to be there anyway. Let's pre-stage it. Okay, and I come at the gun at a 45-degree angle, so my trigger finger is pointing at the ejection port. If I come down here at an angle, high in the grip tang, as I close these 3 fingers, they automatically tighten up and wedge under the trigger guard. This finger now is safely away from the trigger, and I have my good grip. We're there. Solid grip, no wiggle. The gun wants to do this. I've got a good tight grip on it. It's not going anywhere. So by how you pick up your gun and then how you interface with the gun with few variables. Now, there can be a difference in size. This particular gun lines up with my forearm, so when I point my forearm in my finger gun, it goes where I want it to be. A fat gun, however, I finger on the trigger, wrap, fingers around. You'll notice that it's pointing now to one side. It's off at an angle. This is where your instructor comes in to do these things you may have heard of. Weaver stance, isosceles stance, to get the gun to point where it needs to point. Those are the sorts of things to make you hold that tool correctly. Get an instructor, spend some time on the range, think about it. Your instructor will show you what to do with that second hand that we never even had time to talk about. Okay? Do I put that second hand here? Do I wrap the fingers around? We could spend hours with that. So do that. Do that with an instructor. And always, when you're shooting, you've got the 4 rules.
There you go. That's great. And I think that one of the points that you made early on was be consistent. So once you start doing something, do it and do it and do it. So do it right and then do it often. And then it's so much easier if you're consistent with it every time you pick it up in exactly the same manner. And then an instructor can work with you. So folks, firearmsacademy.com is the website for Tom and Diane Walls. And you're gonna love all the videos that they have put together with us in the Guns 101 series. And if you're lucky enough to be able to get out to the West Coast, you're gonna love taking a class with them. So firearmsacademy.com. Check it out.
Thank you.
Thanks.